morning, Marco.
Hello, good morning. I'm setting it up so that we have a streaming feed.
Okay, no problem. Just wanted you to know I'm here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Marco?
What's up?
Hey, did you have a specific time that Adrian was supposed to be on the agenda?
So given that Adrian is replacing the chancellor effectively, yeah?
I'm sorry, say that, I'm sorry. Can you say that again for me?
So given that Adrian was, right, we will have ever had,
You want her to take the slot that?
hold on, because I'm getting a mess that I'm hearing back the YouTube,
Oh, okay,
feed.
all right.
Hold
No
on a
worries.
second. How do I stop that from coming back? Okay, good. Now I don't hear the streaming. Otherwise, I heard this question like 4 times because like you repeated and then the YouTube repeated it. So she's replacing the chancellor effectively,
Okay,
right? So,
okay,
so we keep the same time as, so from 10 to 10:30 for a question that we will have asked to the chancellor, and then we might still have a moment for Face to move on to present something or to do some.
oh, okay, let me just let her know. Okay, all right, no problem, thank you.
Sure.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Marco.
Hello, good morning. Just a reminder for everybody, we are streaming it right now live on YouTube. Just, I mean, this part will be eventually deleted once all this part before the meeting actually starts. I will delete after the fact, but we are right now live on YouTube.
Great morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm okay. I can't complain. One day at a time.
That's
You
How's
better
the
right.
not
family?
complain, Jimmy.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Just sorry, I was away. I don't know if somebody was saying anything, expecting me to respond, but we're gonna start in what, 2 minutes. Nice to see quite a few people. Man, I had not seen in a while.
I know, Marco. How are you? Good
Good.
to see you.
Good to see you.
So, Jimmy, will I be able to do a screen share of the presentation while I'm
Sure,
talking, or should I just talk and give it to
No,
you guys after?
you'll be able to do screen sharing.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. Okay, so I guess we can actually start this meeting. We're gonna start with a roll call to take attendance of the CPAC voting members. So I'm Marco Batista from District 1, and I'm here. Leonard, I know I saw
I'm
you
here.
earlier. Yeah, how are you doing?
Nice to see you, Marco.
Nice to see you. Jimmy, I also saw you. And Rashida, I think she was here earlier. Yes, she is.
Yes, here.
Jacqueline, District 5, are you here? Are you here? Otherwise, somebody is gonna join us. Maybe a few minutes late.
Please.
Okay, not yet. District 6? Not yet. 7? 8?
Here.
Hello, Lourdes. 9?
Good morning.
10? Not yet. 11? Miriam, I see you.
Good morning.
Good morning. 12?
Good morning.
Hey, Doris. Celia, 13? Not yet. 14? Not yet. 15?
I am here. Good morning.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
16?
Good morning.
Hey. 17, I don't see her. 18, not yet. 19, not yet. 20, I think I see you, yes.
Morning, Marco.
Hey, good morning. 21, Randy, I saw you before.
Morning.
22,
Good morning.
hey, how you doing? 23, I don't see you yet.
Good morning.
Oh, you are here, okay. Sorry.
It's okay.
24, Mati, I not here yet. 25, Francis was one of the first.
Morning.
Hello. 26, not yet. 27, Mahali, I think I saw you. Yes, there you
Yes,
are.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Jessica, 28. Yes, you're there.
Good morning.
Good morning. 29. Oh, I need to rename myself, by the way. I still say the meeting will start at 9:50. 29, I don't see Shuri yet. 30, not yet. 31, no. 32, Jesse, I did see you.
I'm here.
earlier.
Good morning.
Yes. Andrea, 75. No. Brooklyn High School. Bronx High School. Manhattan High School.
I'm here. Good morning, everybody.
No. Queens High School, Chevian, I think I saw her earlier. Otherwise, was I wrong?
She's logging in. She's gonna be here.
I got it at 9:30.
And Staten Island High School, Aaron, I don't see him yet. Okay. And Marie, you're here, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Six is here. Good morning.
Hello. Who was
District
that?
6.
Oh,
That's all key there.
great, thank you. Okay, let me just rename myself 1 second. Sorry, guys. It doesn't make sense that my name is meeting starts at 9:50. Okay, much better. Please, everybody that is a CPAC voting member, if you can rename yourself into the district in front of your name so that we have an easy time tracking that. One more second. All right. How are you doing, Adrian? You're muted.
Good morning. I'm doing well. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Marco. Super.
All right. So unfortunately, for those who haven't been informed yet, the chancellor is not going to be able to be here today. So this first half an hour that we had dedicated to him, we have Adrian instead. Some of the questions we can still ask to her. If she's not going to have the answer, I guess we can have it. Just send it in and see if we can get it in writing or in some other way, the answer to questions we had. And then, so also, Adrian, you mentioned that you wanted to maybe show like a 1-minute video that was displayed at the town hall yesterday.
Yes. Do you have
right?
that? Is Shona on? Did she share that with you?
I didn't see it anywhere, but we can do it. We can solve it in the meantime. Maybe we can show it a little bit later. Meanwhile, I don't know if you have something that you want to just introduce, or otherwise we're gonna just start and ask question away.
Do I have the ability to share my screen? Is that possible?
So you should be able to. I just need to So what does it say when it says share your screen? It doesn't let you?
Let me see how this will work. Hold, give me 1 second to get the mechanics of this. I can't share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen for a moment just to show this video. I have it. I think it'll answer some questions better than I can answer them. And so I'll start with that and then we can jump in if that works for you, Marco.
That's great.
Okay. All right.
It's almost time for school. Here's what we're doing to protect our school communities from COVID-19. Supplies. Our schools will have all the PPE and cleaning supplies they need, including 4.4 million face masks and 1.5 million cloth face coverings, 3.5 million bottles of hand sanitizer, 80,000 canisters of disinfectant wipes. Cleaning. 6,600 maintenance staff will disinfect all school buildings after school and clean high-touch zones multiple times daily. Electrostatic disinfecting. 3,750 electrostatic sprayers will efficiently disinfect surfaces with zero physical contact. HVAC equipment. We have surveyed all buildings to ensure maximum ventilation. Rooms without adequate ventilation will not be used for teaching. Safety signage. 210,000 signs will be put up throughout schools to make sure that students keep physical distance and practice good hygiene. To learn more about how we're putting safety first this school year, visit schools.nyc.gov/return-to-school 2020.
So thank you for letting me share that. I just think that that's a great visual. For most of us, we haven't seen an electrostatic sprayer. We don't really have a visual as to what it's going to look like exactly in the fall. And I think, at least for me, this was a helpful, like, oh, okay, I can start to picture what our schools are going to look like, because they are going to look different. And then how our principals and our teachers are going to sort of have an eyeball and make sure that everyone is socially distancing. We'll have these, the decals like we see in a lot of the restaurants and some of our stores. Those are going to be in our schools, and that's going to help orient everyone to safety and making sure that they're social distancing. So with that, Marco, I am happy to open it to questions. I will say I sent this out to everyone who's on this call on Friday. The city released its reopening plan to the state. It's on our website. So that's part of the end of week wrap up. There's a link to it. It's over 100 pages, which means there's a lot of detail in there. And I don't want to go through it all here, because I know you all have, many of you have read through it and probably have a lot of questions. And so with that, Marco, I don't know if you just want to jump into questions and whether or not I'm separating sort of this piece of reopening and updates on reopening and answering those questions from FACE and the work that FACE is doing, because we're doing some really, really wonderful work in FACE that I'm excited about also.
Right, yeah, so this part of the meeting, we are actually just, as if you were the chancellor, we are here replacing the chancellor. So we are asking questions that we would have asked the chancellor otherwise. And then if you have something specific for FACE that you want to share, you can do that in basically at 10:30 when we are done with this part of the meeting. That's good?
That works. And I am happy to be here. I think Sharon Rensher from the First Deputy Chancellor's Office is also with us. Super glad that she's on the call as well. And so for some questions, she's really our liaison. I see some of our colleagues in the state are here with us from the regions, from NYSED. And so for some questions, if there are questions related to the document, the sort of plan that was submitted to the state, she's there to be able to support in some of that.
That's great. That's fantastic. So let's just move on with questions. First question comes from Francis, D25.
Hi, Adrian. Good morning. So we have we're collectively getting the questions and asking them for our different districts, and we know that the ventilation is being surveyed, but we want to know, is there a possibility that the schools will open even in buildings have not been upgraded to the health standards that were recommended? And sorry, second part is, when will parents have access to data reports about this?
So I can tell you that they have done a survey of all of the schools. There is sort of a checklist or a running tally that our custodians are keeping track of, and they're keeping track of both what needs to be done and then the work that's being performed and has been performed. We are working on making some of that, like putting that information into some sort of report that we can make available to parents and to the public. So it's top of mind. It's something that we're currently talking about and something that we intend to do. And what we have said and what the chancellor has really made clear is if within a school there is a space like a classroom or any sort of room that can't be made safe, meaning there's no windows, there's not adequate ventilation, that room, that space will be taken offline. If the entire building is unsafe, then we won't be able to use that building. And so our chief operating officer is on top of this. She's working with our school custodians. Our school custodians are doing the work. They're both sort of remediating classrooms, remediating school buildings, upgrading HVAC systems, upgrading ventilation systems, but also, you know, we are keenly aware and want to make sure that our buildings are safe for teachers, for principals, for all of our school staff, for our students. So we are not going to put anyone's health in jeopardy. And SLTs have been doing their walkthroughs. Our teachers union, our teachers, our principals union, our principals are actively involved in making sure that our schools are safe, and nobody is going to want to return to a school building that's not safe. And so we are in the work. Our custodians are working around the clock to do that, and we're looking to provide information to the public on exactly what the process is and where we are.
All right, great. Jessica, D28.
My question is just this: is there time for the release of the school calendar?
We are working on the release of the school calendar. We certainly sort of have a informal school calendar that we're circulating around. We are shooting for September 10th as the first day of school. We're like steadily planning for that. And I would expect that within the next couple of weeks, we should have a school calendar for everyone.
Sabina, D22.
Good morning. This is also a three-part question regarding lunch. So lunch will be eaten in the classroom, and since masks will be removed, it will defeat the purpose of what we were trying to avoid, as kids tend to spit and talk with their mouths full. What happens when someone sneezes or coughs while masks are off? And will those teachers who are there for instructional lunch be provided with extra PPE and made to change after the lunch period so that they don't spread any germs to the next class? And can you clarify why indoor dining has not yet been approved, but schools will open with lunch in the classrooms? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Obviously, we're not going to do anything that's not going to be approved by the state. And as I said earlier, we have submitted our plan, and you know, we're waiting to hear back from the state. But we will be in full compliance with any rules around, you know, lunch and anything else regarding reopening. Just to go through the thinking, there's certainly going to be on top of PPE throughout the school day, there's going to be 6 feet of social distance in every direction. And so that's part of the reason that we asked for parents to submit the survey last week so that we could start planning and understanding how many students were going to be in the school building coming back to blended learning. And so that principals could select their program, and then from that, be able to start doing the measurements within classrooms, moving the desks around to ensure the social distancing. And so that is the plan for lunch to take place in the classroom, similar to the breakfast in school program that we've seen in the past. Instruction will continue during that time. And so, you know, our teachers, our principals are incredibly responsible. They have done, you know, breakfast in school previously, and this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be students at their desk. It's not going to be students congregated together in the lunchroom, for example, because we want to make sure that there's that social distancing. It's going to be in the classroom. Students will be eating lunch, you know, while instruction is happening from the, you know, the top of the room from the teacher. And students will not be sitting together. They'll be sitting with the social distancing, with ventilation in the school building, with ventilation in the classrooms, opening the windows where that's possible. And so that's the current plan. I think there was a question around teachers and PPE and, like, you know, how much PPE do we have for teachers? I thought the video is a good sort of explains where we are with PPE. So I think we said 4.4 million. There's some huge number of PPE that we've ordered and have and is being shipped out to our schools. And what we've asked of our school custodians is that they have a 30-day supply of PPE available. And as soon as they reach, a place where they don't have that 30-day supply, that they reorder. And we have the contracts in place to be able to do reordering. And so, we're in a brand new territory. We don't know, what's the burn rate going to be on the PPE? Like how many times how many of these PPE do we need to order? Do students, bring them every day? What happens when a student, forgets to bring it or loses it? Then we give them a new one. And it's going to be our school custodians that are monitoring the inventory and making sure that they always within the school have a 30-day supply and then reorder at that point so that there's enough.
Thank you. Martha, Manhattan High School.
Hey, good morning, Adrienne. We were curious about the situation with staff and teachers. It was reported that 85% of teachers are going to return to remote learning. And would you be willing, or do you have the information to tell us how many other teachers applied to have an exemption but were rejected, didn't meet the criteria? I don't want to say rejected, but did not meet the criteria to be offline, to be online only. And are you concerned that there might be issues with the teachers union that may throw a spanner into the works?
Hey, Martha. Thanks for those questions.
And by the way, they always give me the really contentious questions. So just saying.
So I'll answer the question in the best way that I can. The 15% of teachers requesting an accommodation, those are everyone who requested an accommodation. And if you all know, I don't know how much you are in the weeds on what is the medical accommodations process. It's covered by the ADA. So, anyone at any time, any employee can request a medical accommodation, and it's governed. We're very well oriented to it as an agency because people do it all the time. If you're out on FMLA, essentially, and you come back and you're with child or you're having an issue, you request a medical accommodation sometimes. If you're injured and you need, I don't know, some sort of an accommodation to be able to work from home, or if you need to be able to use an alternate, I don't know, like an elevator in the school building. I mean, so on and so forth, but it's a medical accommodation process that you would go through. And so it is literally taking a process that everyone knows about, everyone uses for ordinary things and saying, okay, this is the vehicle for people in this context who maybe have COVID-related issues, underlying conditions, and saying, this is the process that we're going to use to be able to determine whether or not these accommodations are going to be granted. And so that review process, and it's a review process that's done in coordination with our Office of Equal Opportunity, which obviously is responsible for overseeing our compliance with the Civil Rights Act and the ADA, and it is in coordination with our medical department. So DOE has its own internal medical sort of unit and doctors there and physicians. So it's those two departments that look at these accommodations requests. They ask follow-up information. Sometimes they request medical documentation from someone's medical provider, et cetera, but that's the process. And so it's happening now. We have 15% of our teaching staff who have asked for those accommodations. And we will know more about that review process probably in a couple of weeks after it's completely sorted through. And so I think what makes it sort of easy, just to your question about did we reject anyone? No, anyone can file a medical accommodation. You can file a medical accommodation on any range of issues. The question of whether it's something that is recognized as a medical accommodation is something that the medical professionals in DOE in consultation with OEO will decide. And so anyone could have submitted. There was no prevention from people from submitting an accommodation request. I think what we'll learn more is at the end of this process, when there's a determination as to whether, who within that 15% is granted or not granted or extended for more information.
Actually, that's really helpful because it was not reported that way at all. In the newspaper, it was reported that 15% had been granted. So that's actually a really good clarification. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Randy, District 21.
Good morning, Adrian. So cleaning products and such as Clorox wipes are on back order. How will the DOE guarantee that schools will be cleaned and disinfected on a daily basis? And also we heard that schools are receiving only 1 or 2 electrostatic packs. So what happens if they break down?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can you say that one more time? If what breaks down?
The electrostatic packs, we heard that schools are getting either one or two. So what happens if they break down?
That's a great question, and we haven't had that experience yet because we haven't started. But these are brand new pieces of equipment, and so my expectation would be, I don't know what our contract is, our procurement contract for these devices, but if it's like any other, then we would probably be going back to the contractor and saying we need a replacement. We just bought this, and we would be getting a replacement device, a replacement cleaner. So it's the expectation when you buy something brand new is that it works. And certainly our custodians, before school starts, they're going to be using these because we're cleaning all of our schools before students, before teachers, before principals even return to the school building. And if something breaks down, then we'll replace it. And my hope is that we won't have to pay for it because it should be covered under some sort of warranty, but I don't know the contract.
Right. Thank you. Celia, D13.
Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Austin. District 13's question is regarding communications. Because we are communicating with parents on various platforms, Zoom, WebEx, Google Meets, Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, just to name a few, has there been guidance around using these platforms in a way that fosters greater inclusion rather than exclusion of parents? Not all parents have smartphones or an internet connection. Many links have been sent out without a dial-in option. How is this going to be addressed? Things be mailed, or have they been mailed? What other ways has the DOE reached out to families? Part of this is part and parcel with, for example, the survey. When you have the regular school survey, the green survey, it's actually mailed out. If, let's say, somebody didn't come and pick it up parent-teacher night, it actually gets mailed to your house, so you catch whoever else didn't get it before in time for them to send it back in. Was that done with the survey, to the returning to school survey? And in what ways? And other than that, even PAs and PTAs that are using these platforms still have to remember that there are a lot of parents, because unlike popular belief, not everybody has a smartphone. So what ways is the DOE going to give guidance towards making it an inclusive process if we're going to remain on platforms for a while?
Thank you. That's a great question, Celia. It's a timely question because it's something that we're thinking about, particularly in the Division of Community Empowerment, Partnerships, and Communications. You're right. It is not all parents have access. Not all parents are, online and looking at the latest DOE updates on the website. And so we're thinking through, and we've even started to think through alternative ways of contacting parents. And so we have, for the last maybe 2 weeks or so, had our outreach team. It's about 50 people making calls to parents to follow up on the survey, on the remote learning survey, reaching out specifically to our immigrant communities who we know we've had just a challenge in reaching. And we have heard that a lot of our immigrant communities feel disconnected from our communication channels. And so we've been making phone calls to follow up. We sent earlier in the summer, I think maybe midsummer or towards the end of this, maybe it was towards the end of the school year, but we actually sent a mailing. It's incredibly expensive to mail. It's like, close to $500,000 to do one mailing out. And that's like a postcard. And so, some of this just comes down to, like wanting to basically be as effective as we can and also fiscally responsible. And so we do plan on doing another mailing, but they're few and far between because of how expensive they are. And we plan on doing another mailing before the school year starts, just to make sure that families who are not connected to our channels, who have not maybe received a phone call, don't have a phone, get at least some form of correspondence. We are also using our informal networks. And part of the reason why every week FACE is sending emails to all of our parent leaders, so our President's Council executive boards, all of our CEC members, our parent coordinators, our FLCs, and then also our community advocates. So, our advocates for children, all of the different community-based organizations that we work closely with, in our elected officials, part of the reasons why we're sending all those emails out is in the hope that everyone who receives these emails, and everyone is a leader and everyone who's getting these emails has a distribution list. The hope is that they are turnkeying, that everyone is turnkeying that information and using those informal networks to get the word out. because, that's oftentimes, especially for communities that are disconnected and are not online and are not participating in these large forums, word of mouth is going to be an effective communications tool. And so that's what we're trying to utilize every channel we've got. The mayor and the chancellor, I mean, you've seen them on the news. The chancellor has been, all over the place. He's on Univision, he's on sort of network TV, he's on various, every opportunity we can. I'm out here, you guys have seen me on some of these elected official town halls and forums. I really don't turn them down. And which means that I'm doing them a couple times a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. But all of that is an effort to make sure that we're getting the word out to parents, because there are so many parents that are disconnected, and it's hard to get the word out when we don't have our traditional channel, which is everyone comes to school and our principal can backpack a letter home and make sure that every parent gets it because the student is in school. So it's challenging. Celia, I would be happy to get, if you guys have suggestions, if there's other things we can be doing and thinking through, we would love to have, always open to suggestions. It's a difficult area. It's like impossible to be at 100% here because there are just plenty of parents who are struggling right now. And, with mental health issues, with fiscal, financial issues. We're in an economic sort of crisis in the city. People are struggling to pay their rent. There's a food crisis. And so with all of that, there are a lot of parents who are just disconnected and probably aren't checking their emails, maybe don't have access to email or internet. And also aren't potentially going outside very often. So, how do we reach those families? And if you guys have ideas of things we can do, I am open to it. I'm really willing to consider anything.
Thank you.
Thank you. D32, Jadzing.
Good morning, Ms. Austin. So the question I have for you is, will physical books be given to remote students and blended to help offset the amount of time spent on technology? Or will all books, i.e. math, science, be in PDF or online versions only? Not every family can afford.
Thanks, Jazzy. Thank you for that question. I think I've gotten this question before, and the answer is going to most likely be dependent on the school and what the school is doing. And so I would want to say, and I don't know if we have our FGC folks on the line, I can get back to you with more specific information, but I'm sure it's dependent on school by school what the schools have capacity to do. And so the best way to find out information is to inquire with the principal and say, to the principals, do you have a plan for remote learning and whether or not the students will have access to the physical textbooks? And then beyond that, then what is the plan if they don't have access to the physical textbooks? Is everything's going to be online? What is that going to look like? Because every school is going to be different.
Okay, great. Jimmy, District 3.
Good morning, Adrian. How are you? My question is, what citywide guidelines are in place for the new families that are coming in when we're working with the CBOs, the 3Ks and pre-K, as well as kindergarten through 12th grade? How are they being informed? And how are they going to be able to be a joining part of this new community, the school community? Are there guidelines for this?
So I think I sent you maybe a week or so.
You sent me something for the for the CBOs, but in return, you sent it to me and I can share and talk about it. But if you have an idea, it would be able, because we have parents on here that have children going to CBOs as well, since the DOE has taken over and being responsible for that. So this is the reason why this question is being asked.
Thank you, Jimmy. No, it's a great question. The people who can answer this question most in depth are the folks from the early childhood team. And they've given a lot of thought to it. So like they've got the guidance documents that have gone out to the CBOs. The CBOs are doing work directly with parents. They have their own sort of parent teams that they're organizing. It's just a very substantive area. And so I would love, and I think it would be a great idea to have those folks come and talk to CPAC and answer these questions, because they've done a lot of thinking around it. I know they have developed a lot of guidance, and they do a lot of direct support to CBOs and to pre-K providers. And so for them to come in and talk about that, I think you would be impressed by it, but also I'm not going to be able to give you all of the detail that they can, and I would love for them to come and do that.
Okay, but we also talking, as far as it's concerned, with our new parents that's coming in, especially if they chose 100% remote? How are they going to make that contact? And this goes across the board, whether they in CBOs or our public schools. We're talking our K through 12 as well as our pre-Ks that's in the public schools. This is what I'm asking about.
It's a great question, Jimmy. It's a question of like, how do you foster a community, a school community, if there are students who start the year completely online and they're new to school? How do you create that sense of community? And I think that's something that principals are figuring out and trying to do. Principals are having parent meetings. Principals are being encouraged to have some form of an orientation before school starts. Certainly, I know teachers are going to be thinking about how to cultivate that sense of community. I can tell you what I know so far, just in terms of the instructional relationship between the remote teacher and the in-person teacher. There is a plan every day for those two teachers, the one who's teaching remote and the one who's teaching in person, to have 30 minutes of time to plan together, so that there's a consistency and an alignment between what's happening remote and what's happening in person. And I think, you know, a lot of how we make sure that school still feels like a community, regardless of whether you're in person or whether you're, you know, online at home, that cultivation of community is going to be important. And it's going to be something that happens at the school level through the leadership of the principal, and through the thoughtful sort of planning with teachers. So more to come, Jimmy, and I you know, would welcome sort of thoughts on how, if you have ideas on what we should be thinking.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you. Katea, District 15.
Good morning, Adrian. I wanted to piggyback off of your openness to suggestions and ask what the response is to the grievances that the District 15 principals put out a petition dated for August the 11th, urging the DOE to delay school openings. Do you have a response to that?
Thank you for that wonderful question. You know, that I believe that letter was addressed to the chancellor. And so, you know, that is the chancellor, and God bless him. It is a difficult job. I can't imagine walking in our chancellor's shoes, but the chancellor is working with our labor partners. He's working with CSA, he's working with UFT, he's working with DC 37. I can go down the line, to be able to get us all to a place where we are on the same page with respect to what's happening in September. And so those are difficult conversations. Our chancellor is leading those conversations. And so, you know, I have full faith and confidence in our chancellor to be able to respond to letters he's receiving. We're receiving lots of letters, to respond to, you know, the press, media inquiries around this, and some of the conversations that are that we're having more publicly with our union partners. The chancellor is responsible for all of those, managing all of those conversations. It's difficult, but he's doing a great job of it. And I'm hopeful that we will all sort of iron out any disagreements or challenges or you know, differences of opinion as we move towards September.
But there is an expectation that he will respond to this, right?
The chancellor is responding to everything. The chancellor is responding. He is responding, even if it's not a formal letter. He's making phone calls. He's in meetings. Part of the reason why he was unable to attend today is because he's in meetings. A lot is happening around the clock in terms of our work with our labor partners, and with City Hall, and with our test and trace and Department of Health. And our chancellor is really knee deep in all of those conversations to get us to a place where we're all comfortable with the health and safety protocols that are in place. And that we're all, you know, comfortable with the level of preparation and understand what are the deliverables that need to happen before September. So that's part of the reason why the chancellor's not here this morning, is because he's literally in one of those sorts of conversations, and he's leading those conversations. And yes, I think he's answering everyone in different ways and in strategic and smart ways. And thank God we have a chancellor who is committed to this work, committed to the educational equity of our system and our students. And our families. And so more to come. He'll be with us next time, I'm sure. and then you can ask him the question directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. Rashida, District 4.
Unmute. Good morning. Hey, Adrian. Good morning, everyone. My question is fairly odd. It's not as urgent, but it's important enough to bring up. So just that we're all on the same page. Can we get DOE, like directly from Central, to issue a suggested waiver or an official notice to the schools and principals to be mindful and increase flexibility for uniform requirements? Like, this question was raised because many of us are struggling to imagine what our children's education and school day will look like with this whole new social distancing and everything. And we don't want our families stressing out over shopping for uniforms, especially if they can't afford it, and are focusing on SEL. We don't want our children to be penalized for not wearing their uniform when they show up in person. Second part, Adrian, is since this topic was raised and the discussion started, I'm asking, will there also be a mandate remote learning attire? Like, has that been discussed at all? We hope not, but I needed to bring it up to you.
These are great questions. They're questions that that I haven't actually gotten before. It's rare that I can say that now, that there's a unique question that I haven't actually received, and these are two questions I haven't gotten. So thank you. Uniform requirements. I will bring this to the first deputy chancellor. I mean, I think it just goes without saying that there's going to have to be flexibility. Everyone is aware that families are under a lot of stress and pressure. Everyone is under a lot of stress and pressure, and principals are really focusing on the nuts and bolts of getting us ready for reopening. There are so many things that principals have to consider and plan for. And so uniform requirements probably is like on the very bottom of their list, because quite frankly, it's the least important thing about reopening. It's more important to figure out social distancing and how to implement that, and school scheduling and programs and staffing and cleaning and ventilation. All of those things are things our principals are oriented and focused on, in addition to communicating with families. Uniform requirements are probably at the bottom of that list. And I would imagine that there would be a lot of flexibility from principals on, like what students are able to afford at this time, knowing that there's so many people who are out of work. And so I will bring this to the first deputy chancellor. I think there'll be a lot of flexibility and sensitivity around this. But to your point, it's something we should think about, and I'll make sure that it's on everyone's radar. And that we think about maybe if not a policy, at least some guidance on it. And then just in terms of any sort of like a uniform for remote learning, I don't think that I can't imagine, right? Part of the flexibility of remote learning and learning from home is that you sort of come as you are, and you're doing it at the convenience of your home. I don't know. You don't even know what people are wearing sometimes. Especially like if they're not on video, and there's no requirement that students be on camera. So with that, I can't, there's no plan to have a uniform requirement or any sort of dress code for kids who are online.
So it's 10:30, but we still have 3 questions. So we're gonna go through those 3 more questions and then finish. Cecilia, D26.
Good morning, Adrian and everyone. So a typical teacher's program is 25 instructional periods a week. And so my question is, can these teachers be programmed to spend that time delivering instruction across all 3 presenting models of instruction, meaning X periods of in-person instruction to blended students, Y periods of synchronous and asynchronous instruction to blended students who are at home, and Z periods to instruction who are 100% remote. I know you said that you're hiring a lot of teachers, but I just have it in my district that we're all having a very hard time understanding how we wouldn't need triplet or at least double the teachers that we had. How is that going to work?
Great question. I think we've gotten a lot of staffing questions across the board, and it's something that our HR is working on and thinking about, our chancellor is thinking about, everyone is thinking about staffing. How do you make sure that there are enough teachers in order to be able to adequately staff our classrooms? And so we're working on it, is what I can tell you. And certainly there are conversations that are happening. We're just now in a position, now that we know the number of teachers that are seeking medical accommodations who presumptively are going to be requesting to work online remotely. We're now in a position to actually start to plug in the numbers and say, okay, if this number of students are planning to come back and this number of teachers are planning to come back remotely and this many in person, what does it look like? What's the mathematical formula here? And then how many additional teachers do we need in order to make this work? So we're just starting to be able to be in a position to do that analysis and then formulate a plan where there are shortfalls. And there's more to come. We have a lot of thinking. We have 150,000 employees, which is pretty incredible. We have 80,000 teachers, and we have a significant number of central staff folks who have underlying teaching credentials. And so there's just a lot in our borough offices as well. And so there's a lot of smart thinking happening about how to, effectively utilize the teachers we have across our system to support. More to come.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deleta, District 9. Let's go to Matty, District 24, then we go back to Deleta.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Adrian. Good morning, parents watching us. So Adrian, my question is, and I've asked several people and I've yet to get a response. So I'm going to ask you with the hopes that you have one. Some of the same zip codes, all within different districts, so we're talking about across the city, not just my district, that have already been affected disproportionately by the virus, still have infection rates over 3%. With these zip codes, with the infection rate still over 3%, how will those schools even be able to open? And also, some high school and middle school students travel across boroughs, across districts. How is the DOE considering these disparities and thinking about transmission across neighborhoods and even community spread once it's actually in a specific zip code? I'm not going to say neighborhood because it's actually very specific to zip codes.
Great question. I actually was in a conversation with our Deputy Chancellor of School Climate and Wellness on this exact topic yesterday. And so I can tell you that she is talking to Test and Trace and Department of Health and Mental Hygiene and City Hall about this issue. What do we do? What policies do we need to have in play? How do we think about this in a way that protects the health and safety of our students and our staff? And so that conversation is happening. People are oriented to it. I want you to know that it exactly those issues, both, how are we thinking about our zip codes that are, more at risk and more highly impacted by COVID? How are we thinking about those, treating those, focusing on those and making sure that students are safe, and then also thinking through, and for those zip codes, if they have higher infection rates.
Bring your tablet.
And those students are traveling across the city. How do, potentially would be traveling across the city. How do we, minimize risk? Because obviously we don't want people who are sick to be transmitting the virus through inner city travel. And so thinking about all those things, more to come, but I will tell you there are active conversations on that now.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure if Deleta is able to ask her question right now.
I can ask the question, sorry.
Great, no, don't worry, go ahead.
Good morning. Has a decision been made regarding the admission policy for 2021 school year and beyond?
No, I think the simple answer is no. We did a really, I think like a pretty robust engagement tour in the spring with the early child and enrollment team. So we did, we went to every borough, then we kicked that off and ended it with a citywide event where we really heard from parents and got a lot of feedback on the different ideas that were on the table for admissions policy. And that team is still working on developing and getting approval from City Hall on a policy to be able to roll out. So if we bring in the early child and enrollment team, I would say to talk about the early childhood plan, it will be great to also have that team speak to where they are with the admissions policy and when they think that they'll have a deliverable.
Great. Thank you, Adrian. So if you now wanted to share something specific for FACE, this is the moment.
Okay, great.
And I also have a question for you after you finish with that specific on FACE.
Is it a FACE question?
Okay, you wanted a question first? It's not a question. It's just there is the feeling that there are a lot of things that still need to happen to allow PAs and PTA to work properly. In September, access to the building to be able to retrieve documents, guidance on how to run online elections, further guidance or support mostly in how to do finances, or potential changes or waivers to regulations, lots of things. So we wanted to ask you if it's possible to have maybe a meeting specific on this issue. The sooner the better. We were even ready to suggest next Thursday, but I don't want to put you on the spot to like say yes or no right now because you were not informed before that I would be, but that could be a potential date. Otherwise, we can discuss of a different date because we feel is a topic that many PAs are in need of support and of guidance.
Thank you. Happy to have a meeting on the topic. I know, first, I just want to start by thanking FACE. The Office of Family and Community Empowerment rarely gets any, our staff are like, they rarely get kudos. They they don't expect acknowledgement. And they work really, really, really hard. So I know some of them are in the room. Thank you. Thank you, Shona. Thank you, Claudette. And I could go down the list of almost every liaison who is working around the clock to serve. So thank you all for that work. I know that there is a team, I think Lynn and BB and a couple of other liaisons, Anthony Settle, there's a series of liaisons who are working on this follow-up guidance around these topics. And they've started to think through FLCs that should be a part of the conversation. I would extend the invite now to you all for Thursday. If you want to have this meeting, I think that would be great. If you guys give us names for who you would want to be in the meeting, I think that would be perfect. And then we can plan on Thursday, and I'll connect you with Lynn and the other members of that team to make sure that conversation happens, because they're thinking about it. They're trying to put something together, especially around elections. We know a lot of PAPTAs didn't hold their elections in the spring, but they need to hold them in the fall. And so making sure that there's really specific guidance so that they do it without generating a lot of grievances, and they're inclusive of all their parents and their school communities. We want to make sure we give really good, solid guidance there. So thank you all. CPAC, you guys really supported us in the spring to give out guidance in the spring on some of this stuff, but we really need to follow up, and I would love to have that conversation on Thursday.
So you're saying that Thursday actually is a good time for you?
Yes, Thursday's
okay. Brilliant. Okay,
let's do it.
It's set.
Yes. So that would be great. And I want to move it forward. We're doing 1,000 things. I mean, if you could imagine the scope of work between PAPTAs, thinking through SLTs and working with Sharon Rencher on finding ways to support our SLTs, supporting our CECs. Our liaisons are at every one of those public meetings every month and supporting the CEC members with questions and technical assistance and training. In addition to, we're doing some really good stuff. So Marco and Jimmy, I sent you guys that email around our Equity Council. We are looking to have our first meeting of the Equity Council on Monday. And what that is, that Equity Council is a part of the work that FACE has been doing to advance equity in our office and in this area of parent leadership. Somehow, some way, we are in a space where there's really no policy around equity or anti-discrimination or sexual harassment in parent leadership spaces. And so what that has meant is it's like the wild, wild west. So we get a lot of complaints from parents who say, I'm participating, I'm a parent leader, and yet I feel like I'm being a victim of discrimination. And we want to be in a place to say, like, we have a clear policy. That's unacceptable. There's no discrimination allowed. There's no sexual harassment allowed against parent leaders who have stepped up and are participating in these bodies. So that's part of what we're asking the Equity Council policy to think through and provide recommendations on. Policy, anti-bias resources and training for our parent leaders, and then language access, which is something that is top of mind, very important to me and very important to our chancellor, making sure that there's language access. So that's what the Equity Council is being asked to consider. CPAC, you guys, I'm hoping you send me 5 names by the end of the day so that we can have people.
Yeah, we will, don't worry.
Thank you, who can work with us to do that important work. I will also share with you, we had our family and student information session yesterday. We had over 20,000 parents attend. We have another one scheduled for the 27th. Thinking through the agenda of that now. We are planning a joint event with the Department of Health and Test and Trace for the week of August 31st, where we share both where we are as a city, what's the health status, where the Department of Health tells us, like, to the point of the earlier question, like, where are the hot spots? what's the overall virus infection rate, and then some tips on how to stay safe. And then our Division of School Climate and Wellness is going to chime in with what should parents be thinking about now to prepare kids for mask wearing, for social distancing. How do you prepare kids for that? So that look out for more for that about that event. And then we have an in Spanish, all Spanish in language event that the chancellor is going to host by the end of the month as well. And that's for our Spanish communities. We are fortunate to have a bilingual chancellor. We have some other DOE officials who are bilingual, and they're going to be hosting that event. So look out for more on that. Again, tons of other things moving, bases continuing to have their check-ins with everyone, but these are the big sort of policy areas that are moving quickly that we want to be able to deliver on. Thank you.
No, thank you. So I guess we are done with the phase section. We are gonna give it over to Jimmy to introduce her next part of the meeting.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to introduce Nan Need, who's our New York State Regent, and she was a former CPAC member. Nan, take it away.
Thank you, Jimmy. So Marco, am I able to share the screen now?
You should be able to. If you can't, I can help you.
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can do this. Share. All right. Can you all see this presentation?
It says you
yes.
Okay, super. Yay, got on the first try. So hi, everyone. I'm Nan Mead. As Jimmy mentioned, I am a member of the Board of Regents, and I'm a former CPAC member. And I'm thrilled to see so many familiar faces from my CPAC days. So great to see you all. And I really have to applaud you for really, taking the summer to do this really important work and helping, your communities reopen schools. So I promised Jimmy I would keep this to 45 minutes, including the Q&A. So I'm going to start my little timer now. I'm going to go through this presentation somewhat quickly, but I will send it to you after. And when we do the Q&A, I'm going to introduce Mary Beth Casey, who works in State Ed. She is Assistant Commissioner for the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, and Jason Harmon, who is an Assistant Commissioner in the Office of Accountability for ESEA funded programs and field support. And he also runs the Committee of Practitioners meetings. So with that, I've been sitting in on some of these calls. I sat in on your call with Chancellor Carranza last week. I listened to a little bit of last night's call, and some of you, may be wondering where some of these city plans are coming from. They're coming from a very real place. The State Education Department embarked on a very rigorous process to gain perspectives from all across the state through a series of regional forums. We had 5 such forums. There was one in New York City, one on Long Island, and 3 upstate. They included parent groups as well as teachers, students. We actually had a separate student forum, administrators, other stakeholders. So Sharmali Ramunit from the Education Council Consortium was there. Lainey Hameson was there. State PTA was there. I did a number of smaller calls with some of the folks actually on the phone now, and CEC members as well. So, and the Education Council Consortium and other advocates, who serve these communities, CBOs, et cetera. So West Ed was the organization that kind of helped us sift through all of this data that we accumulated over a several week period. And we're also working internally across the program offices. And I think it's important to note that this guidance really is centered on, kind of local education agencies and, community control. So there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach to what we're doing. Yes, New York is a large and diverse state, which we know. Okay, so here's our kind of list of topics that we, have kind of siloed the world into. which very, similarly maps over to, I think, the conversations that you've been having with Chancellor Carranza and others within the DOE. So obviously, family engagement, you're going to have a bunch of calls coming up. I think the governor insisted that all the big five have 5 points of contact with their parent groups during the month of August. Health and safety, facilities, we've talked about some of that during this Q&A. I'm taking very copious notes. Nutrition, transportation, scheduling, money, right? Attendance, technology, teaching and learning, special ed and ELs, and staffing. Clearly, we want for students to continue to have access to healthy food, whether they're in school or not. We are hoping that districts will include food service directors in the reopening plan, and that child nutrition program requirements are met even as we reopen, and even as some students will continue in a virtual format. And I think, to Celia's question earlier, it is important that the district continue to communicate with families who meet the needs in the languages spoken by families and in the mode of communication that they prefer. Social and emotional well-being. So we believe that, social emotional, it's not an either social emotional support or academics. We believe that academic achievement is best served when schools provide a socially emotional sustaining environment, right? So it's imperative that districts and schools are facilitating exercises and staff to support the needs of students so that they feel comfortable and safe in the learning environment. And we believe that when that happens, they in turn will show academic success. Not only should our students be supported, but staff should also be supported, right? So building healthy school communities. So even the folks who are, driving the buses, working the cafeteria, other folks working in the school offices, administrators, et cetera, and that we are leveraging transformative social emotional support to continue the work of anti-racism and anti-bias work. I mean, I think we're in a racialized pandemic, right? Communities of color are in distress on multiple levels. I've spoken with school leaders who have entire school communities of students with parents who are first responders. I've spoken to other folks, who have communities lost many members of families in that community. So, really, we want folks to be mindful of the communities that they're serving, and we want them to support their students in a way that, continues along the lines of building anti-racism work. Facilities. We've talked about facilities during this call. Obviously, social distancing is still required per health and safety guidelines. And, we recognize that this has been a challenging piece for a lot of folks. We are allowing districts to expand their physical footprint or change the way they utilize the spaces, but at the same time, the plans do have to be submitted and reviewed. They still have to be approved according to fire and building codes. And that includes lease space and temporary classrooms. And also fire and lockdown drills still need to be conducted. And those exercises need to be conducted with social distancing in mind. Ventilation, all facilities have to meet these minimum ventilation requirements. I think that's been spoken to here earlier, as well as plumbing. We want students to have access to drinking water. And, we will do our best to expedite review of any projects that are related to either of those. Transportation. I think some folks started asking about transportation. It's a huge challenge across the state. And, we remind each district that schools will need to develop their own plans, considering geography, resources, student needs, but also, for students who are in foster care, homeless, having disabilities, etc. School buses have to be regularly cleaned. They have to be maintained. Staff have to be trained. Even at the bus stops, we're recommending social distancing at bus stops and mask wearing, etc., and safely and staggered loading and unloading of students. So again, budget and fiscal, all of the reporting requirements regarding state aid need to be maintained, except where there have been exceptions made. Attendance, I think Chancellor Carranza talked about this last night on the call. Attendance counts this year for state aid purposes. And, the reporting still needs to go in through this SAMS Form A. Schools are responsible for developing, ways to collect and report student-teacher engagement, regardless of the instructional setting. And, finally, I think, actually, I think it's on the next page, but we're talking about, let's not do this in a way that villainizes parents. Again, we have a lot of parents in New York City who are living in transient housing, unstable housing, and it's really critical that school communities are reaching out to those parents rather than immediately, sort of going to social services in a punitive way. It's there at the bottom of this one in terms of addressing chronic absenteeism. So again, just want to reinforce that point that schools need to, really make best efforts to engage with parents, even the parents who are challenged with permanent housing. In terms of scheduling, I think you're already talking about, making choices between hybrid instruction and remote instruction, and the plans should be clearly communicated with as much notice as possible to families and staff. So with regard to teaching and learning, look, school's back. So we want all students to have clear opportunities for equitable instruction, maintaining continuity of learning that is aligned with the standards, New York State learning standards. And we want substantive daily interaction between teachers and students, right? So teacher to student, student to teacher, and as well as clear communication plans between parents and schools. There is some flexibility around certain aspects. There's a flexible student to staff ratio in pre-K currently, a little bit of extended time for pre-K and kindergarten screening, flexibility with 180 minutes per week, flexibility in the delivery of phys ed. And then with regard to science labs and CTE and CDOS programs, where appropriate, there should be a combination. Ideally, there's a combination of hands-on and virtual learning to the extent that some virtual learning can be, can supplement that coursework. Clearly we will allow districts to do that. Technology, another hot topic. So folks, in speaking with parents individually, I think there have been some parents who, have said, well, maybe I can get by on one device. There's probably somebody else who needs a device more than I do. And my advice to any parent who thinks they can get by on one device with multiple kids, if you qualify for devices, get your device. Please, 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 whether it's through the DOE, whether it's through a community-based organization, whether it's borrowing from a friend or a family member, just please, if you can, because the mental stress, it's a lot to bear. So if you can access those channels, please take advantage of them. And that is the best advice I can give you. And that said, of course, we want for school communities to make sure that all students and teachers have access to devices. You know, obviously we're challenged with the lack of sort of widespread internet access. I've spoken with folks in certain communities who say that they don't have a reliable source of internet access, even if they have a device, which is a separate challenge that really needs to be addressed. Okay. And in addition to that, professional development for teachers and other school leaders should be an ongoing part of the reopen, as well as support for families. And I think Chancellor Carranza talked about that in last week's call regarding, I think he called it Parent University. So let's see, special ed. You know, special ed hasn't really changed. The requirements are what the requirements are. And so schools and districts should be providing free, appropriate public education that is consistent with health and safety. There should be meaningful parent engagement regarding special ed students in the parent's preferred language and mode of communication, right? So what we talked about earlier. And there also should be collaboration between the special ed program and other program providers, instructional and technological supports as needed, as well as documentation on the programs, as well as progress of students communicated directly to families. So none of that has really changed. We are asking districts to consider in-person services a priority for high need students and preschool students with disabilities whenever possible across the board, as well as implementing contingency plans where needed. Again, with regard to bilingual, the support of bilingual instruction must continue. Parents, please communicate with parents in their preferred language and mode of communication. And districts should provide professional development in an ongoing basis to provide support to educators in either mode of instruction. In addition, you know, we want to see supports provided to ELs in the home language. We really want to encourage support of the completion of the New York State Seal of Biliteracy as a credential. We want to ensure that early learning is supported for ELs, as well as SIFE students and other vulnerable populations, and that they continue to use technology in instruction. And again, with staffing, we always have, you know, kind of this ongoing discussion that students should have access to highly qualified teachers. You know, that hasn't really changed, except we recognize that sometimes subs will need to be pulled in. You know, educator preparation programs should be working with the district to help conceive of ways to provide supports to classroom instruction, and whether the current APPR plans should be revised, given, you know, our transition to ongoing online instruction. And so this was kind of the timeline that we followed in July. The forums took place, I want to say kind of end of June, beginning of July. The guidance was released on July 15th. We opened the portal a couple of days later. The 31st was the submission deadline for district reopening plans. A bunch of districts did apply for an extension, and that was extended by a week. And so, yeah, this is kind of dated because I think there are no more extensions at this point. And so that is it. So I want to thank you all for listening. I'm happy to provide a copy of this presentation. I'm now going to turn it over to Mary Beth Casey and Jason Harmon with your questions. And I'm also going to put my contact information in the chat, as well as the link to the SED website and some of these restart materials. So thanks.
Thank you.
Share. Question? No question?
Also, I thought we were going to have so you have two colleagues here, right?
I
do.
do,
Do we want to
yes.
introduce them? Maybe have
Mary
them
Beth.
just say a couple of words, just introducing themselves and. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Mary Beth.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good
and
morning.
thank you for allowing us to listen in. This has been really very interesting for me. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Curriculum Instruction and Early Learning for the State Education Department. I also oversee the Office of Career and Technical Education and Ed Design and Technology. You know, those four offices had somewhat were very hands-on in the creation of the guidance in the digital technology and the teaching and learning sections of the state guidance document. I'm happy to answer any of your questions from the state perspective. You know, I do see a question in the chat, I think was more probably directed to the Vice Chancellor with regard to commuting routes. But if anybody else had any questions around the teaching and learning sections of the document that New York State put out, or questions, you know, related to teaching and learning, I'd be happy to field those now.
So CPAC member, if you just want to raise your hand. Jessica, you are the first raising your hand.
I'm fast. So thank you very much for this information. It has been very, very helpful. You had mentioned Wi-Fi, but my question is that how will that work in the schools with either a DOE device or a personal device that the child may be bringing?
So if I understand your question correctly, how will the schools utilize either personal devices or distribute school-owned devices to students? And that's going to be answered by each individual school based upon their resources and their reopening plan, to the extent to which they are using devices even for students in the building, or if we are, you know, knock on wood, this won't happen, that we are forced to go fully remote in the future. So I'm not sure I can answer your question specifically with regard to each school in New York City. I think that's going to be very, very much different based on each school's reopening plan.
But I guess there is no guidance in terms of like a school having to provide access to, like, basically provide the Wi-Fi information to every student if they are not using a DOE device, or is there, or?
So we are providing as much assistance as we can with regard to connecting schools and districts with acquiring needed devices. New York City has, you know, a robust, you know, network of ways that they've acquired devices through the last 3 months of last year. The state has just acquired, or just arranged for, I won't say acquired, arranged for 16,000 MiFi devices to be procured on a state contract that New York City can also share in. So beyond that, that is going to be completely controlled by the district. Unfortunately, you know, in this economic climate, the state has not received any additional federal funds at this point. And Jason may be able to chime in on this, because I do know that there are funding streams that can help districts acquire devices. Jason, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. And I just want to echo Mary Beth's welcome as well. This has been incredibly helpful to be able to hear directly from all of you. I appreciate the opportunity to join you and to learn from all of you in doing this. Just in the way of a very quick introduction. So I'm in the Office of Accountability. We oversee we have an ESSA funded programs unit that I think Regent Mead mentioned earlier, which administers almost $1.5 billion in federal funds, as well as our field support team, which is providing supports to CSI, TSI schools and target districts. But to Mary Beth's point, and I think Regent Mead brought this up earlier, right? That in a lot of cases, it's not always just about access to devices. It's also about access to connectivity. We've been working to open up. The department has a waiver in place right now from the federal government that loosens some of the restrictions on how the city can use federal funds to procure devices and procure connectivity to be able to support students. And I think Regent Mead's point again earlier was a good one in terms of knowing that there's families that have a device, but where there's multiple students, that's still an issue, or connectivity. Of trying to mitigate that to the extent possible. And Mary Beth mentioned this. I mean, the city had a tremendous rollout in the spring, and so there are some flexibilities on some of the federal sides that we've tried to establish, that we're looking to make sure that those continue going forward, so that the city has flexibility in places where they need it in order to secure devices. Again, whether students are learning in a hybrid model or fully remote, or transitioning back and forth. And so the department and the city have been working very closely to make sure that all of those opportunities are available as needed. And again, sort of community by community, seeing those deployed.
Great. Mary Beth, I don't know if you wanted also to introduce yourself. You just give us your title. I don't know if you want to say anything else. Otherwise, we get more questions.
My more robust introduction. Is that what you meant?
If you want to, you're not since everybody else got a chance.
No, that's fine. And I got a little bit of a chance there. I oversee the 4 offices that I mentioned. Very hands-on in the creation of the guidance document. My offices pretty much are the, I like to think of them as the liaisons between public schools and the department. We have we are very much out there across the state with regard to partnering with other entities such as professional organizations, teacher organizations for early learning, all the different curricular contents, ELA, math, science, social studies, phys ed, languages other than English, etc. So my offices kind of oversee the learning standards and the learning programs that are developed that districts need to align their curriculum to. So while we do not provide curriculum, obviously at the state level, we provide those learning standards that the board approves in all different content areas, and then districts are asked to either develop or adopt curriculum that aligns to those standards that best meets the needs of their individual communities. Again, no one size fits all in the state of New York with 700+ school districts, and even one size does not fit all in the city of New York, where you have, so many multiple languages spoken and so many various communities that you serve. So we like to think of ourselves in the Office of Curriculum and Instruction as sort of your connection to those standards and assisting districts and creating resources, et cetera, that will help districts implement those standards. So that's kind of what all 4 of my teams do.
That's great, fantastic. So again, CPAC members, raise your hand for question. I have actually a few, but I want to give everybody a chance to ask questions first. So I don't see any hand raised, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask my own questions. So you mentioned, Jason, you mentioned about the Office of Accountability. So my feeling is there are I always have been very dubious of the possibility to really be bringing down accountability and seeing how sometimes schools that are targeted as CSI or TSI are actually extremely good schools, just having problems with issues that have nothing to do with the instruction and the efforts. In particular, I have also seen that stretched during this pandemic. I've seen schools that were labeled as CSI or TSI become the best schools in the district, and vice versa, schools that maybe were already having additional issues and challenges to bring forward the instruction that they were trying to do. Are you looking at something different or new ways to try to measure effectively effectivity for schools?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, right? So the pandemic and the closures in the spring in terms of in-person, in building instruction is certainly, obviously with the assessments being canceled in the spring, the accountability system was put on pause. And I think, Marco, to your point, I mean, in the Office of Accountability, one of the areas that we're most excited about is some of the work that our field support team is doing specifically with those CSI schools. We've spent a lot of time working with the principals and the leadership teams in those schools. And we've seen exactly what you're talking about, right? That in some of those buildings, some of the most creative adaptations of what teaching and learning looks like over the last couple of months. And really being thoughtful about, how do you continue to meet the needs of students, academically, social, emotional, all of those different pieces. And some of the most substantial, creativity has come from, those buildings that are quote unquote on the list. And so I think that's an area that we want to continue to explore and try to tease out best practices that we've seen. We want to certainly on our end continue to provide those support models. We're working with districts all across the state right now, including the city, to identify what those will look like so that our supports at the state level can be partnered with the supports that the city is already providing. And I know Sharon is on the call as well. That there's really a collaboration between state supports and city provided supports to make sure whether it's an entire building or specific subgroups that have been highlighted to make sure that those student needs are being addressed. We know that parent and family engagement continues to be at the forefront of one of the necessary ingredients in terms of making sure that is happening, of making sure that parents are supported throughout this process as we go forward. And so that's an area, again, where we're continuing to look into, again, how do we support not just the students in a building, not just the teachers and leaders in a building, but the parents as well. And again, knowing that there's going to be across the city and across the state, a whole range of instructional models that are going to be deployed. So that's an area that we're looking to be able to diversify around the supports that we're providing. We've tried to be flexible. We know that in a lot of cases, work that had started, very good work that had started in a number of those buildings had to be put on pause with the closures. We're allowing for the first time from unspent money around school improvement. Typically those funds don't roll over from one year to the next. We've been able to secure some additional flexibility, again, because we know that some of those buildings have very powerful work that's happening that absolutely needs to continue as things start to come back for in-person. So those are all areas that we're continuing to be mindful of what has already happened and how that can inform what happens as we go forward.
Great. Thank you. Lourdes, I see you had a question in the chat. Do you want to maybe ask it? Or I can read it otherwise, but since it was your question, you can. I guess I'll read it. So her question was how city and state testing is going to look like for students in full remote learning.
So I'm going to let
you can ask for state. You can answer for the state part.
For the state part, I'm going to let Jason field that, as he is more aware and more involved with waivers to the federal government and what the testing may or may not entail this coming year.
Sure. Yeah, and I think if I'm reading the question right, I think Regent Mead had also sort of put a response in here in terms of where we're at in terms of making a determination. I think this is certainly a question that we're getting from a whole number of different angles that certainly within the department across the P12, our Office of State Assessment, myself in Office of Accountability, others, Mary Beth and others. This is a conversation that we're having. We're aware, and I would refer to Regent Mead, but that the board is aware of, and that they're starting to, I think, contemplate. Again, the waiver of the state assessments that happened in the spring came as part of a blanket waiver that the U.S. Department of Ed granted to I think pretty much every state in the country, including New York. At this point, what we've heard is that their U.S. Department of Ed is not planning on a similar approach for 2021. And so this is an area that we're continuing, I think, from the staff side to just continue to do a lot of listening and information gathering so that the conversations internally and that we can help inform the conversations that the board is having. But I think as Regent Mead, and I certainly don't want to speak for her, I think right now it's probably a little bit early in the process for making a determination. But I can tell you that things like the 3-8 assessments, the January regents, those are very much on the radar screen at a number of different levels right now. So Regent Mead, I don't know if you have anything that you would want to layer into or adjust from that sharing.
No, I mean, I think that's right. I think we just have to see how the fall progresses. I mean, obviously, if we go to a fully virtual model, that complicates testing. So, and I can't speak to what that would even look like, or even if this year the process will be the same as last year. But it'll probably be a little while before we have some clarity around that.
The reason why I asked the question is because as a parent of a child who had chosen remote learning, I wouldn't feel comfortable sending my child anywhere to be tested. So that is specifically to remote learning students, the question.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Any hand raised? I have more questions myself. I just don't want to monopolize the question. Okay, Jessica. You have another question. Go ahead.
I do, and we sort of had asked this question to Adrian, but in regards to physical books being sent to children via remote learning, would that be possible? And is that being seen like in other parts of the state?
So all the different parts of the state are handling this in their own way based on the resources that they have. So I can tell you that there are districts in the state that no longer have physical books, even in the normal, realm of non-COVID related instructional practices. So each district is doing something a little different. And I understand from Adrian's answer earlier today that even in New York City, each school may deploy its resources in different ways. So I don't have an answer for that in terms of what it would look like for your particular schools and particular districts.
Thank you. Cherie, D29.
Hi, good morning all. My question is about the next generation learning standards, which was supposed to be implemented this fall, but now has been pushed to next fall before implementation. Can I ask as a parent that we as parents get a more robust training or PD, whatever you want to call it, in terms of over the next year of understanding what the standards are, what the differences from Common Core, and in ways that we can begin improving our understanding as well as helping our children for when the standards do come into place.
Absolutely, and that's a great question. I realize that anytime the state adopts a new set of standards, it is, change is hard, right? So we want to keep our parents, our students, our teachers, our staffs informed. My office is in the process now of creating some resources specifically for parents. We are doing that with stakeholder groups, including the PTA, the statewide PTA representatives. We will continue to create resources around what the new standards mean for students and easy to understand documentation and presentations with regard to what changes parents might expect with the next gen standards for ELA and math. So I take your point. I think it's a great idea, and I will bring that back to my staff and make sure that those projects continue and that we find ways and avenues. And if folks on this call have venues in which you would like presentations to parents on that topic, that's something you could definitely reach out to my office on. We would be happy to deploy staff to answer questions and give some parent-friendly presentations on the new standards.
Yeah, and Mary Beth, if I can just
to add to that, I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead, Jason. Sorry.
So I'm sorry. Just in terms of layering into that, only because I think earlier Regent Mead brought up the Title I Committee of Practitioners, and I'm sure he is one of the members of our Title I Committee of Practitioners representing parents from New York City. And so I think that is one specific venue that's on my radar screen in terms of having those conversations that are happening statewide, where New York City parents have representation, where there's information that can be brought back. I suspect that will be an area, a topic of interest in an area, a forum for being able to relay that back, in addition to the others that Mary Beth mentioned. But knowing that there's sort of a direct line from what Mary Beth's talking about back to this specific group, I think that's one that's on our radar screen to be leveraging to the extent possible.
Great, thank you. And I saw in the chat there was a question from Sabina and Nan. I think you start answering, but Sabina, do you want to ask it so that we have it actually available on, everybody can listen into it?
Sorry, that this question is from the public that I'm just looking at
okay,
live.
Okay.
And they had asked, why was the SHSAT moved to the same weekend as the TACHS? Is that going to be adjusted? And will the SHSAT be in person this year?
I apologize. I'm not familiar with the TACHS acronym.
Me neither.
It was just me.
What is it? I'm assuming the SHSAT is the SAT.
Specialized high school.
Yeah, specialized high school. Like the TACHS, I don't know what it is.
Specialized. Are those city tests? I apologize.
Yes. So
but they are state mandated.
Yeah.
They're state controlled.
Right. But the DOE sets the schedule for the Shazat. I don't know about the TACHS, which for Catholic schools. That's we might have to come back to you on that because I don't know who sets the schedule for that exam, if we do it or if the advisory committee does it on non-public schools.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get back to you on that.
Thank you. I don't see any hand raised. I have one question, which is, so you mentioned, Nan, about substantive daily interaction as part of your presentation, teacher and student. That has been like the main complaint, or vice versa has been the main success when that was a success in schools, and how this remote learning experience have been. And since students will be at least 50% of the time in remote learning, if not 100%, is super important to have that be successful. So are there actually mandates or at least recommendation coming from the state on what teacher-student interaction, live interaction should look like, or what amount of it should happen, or what? You get the question, I think. Just
sure. Mary Beth, do you know if there was a set time, chunk of time embedded in the master document that we recommended?
Right, no, we did not recommend a specific time. We did recommend daily substantive interaction. So
Okay.
that will obviously be dependent upon how much remote instruction a student is getting, what are the activities that are involved, but clearly the expectation is there needs to be substantive interaction between students and teachers every single day with regard to support that learning and also to support their social emotional well-being.
That's great. Great, thank you. Matti, I think you had a question. I see it in the chat.
No, I do not. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Maybe you. Okay. I have another question, actually. I'm sorry. So state guideline for attendance. Are you setting some guidelines on it? You mentioned that this year it becomes an issue, while last year it wasn't, or it was waived. What's the guideline in terms of like what is considered attendance and what is not considered attendance, et cetera, or is up to every school or up to every district to make that determination?
Right, so there is attendance for multiple purposes, and that Regent Mead had a slide up on that. So I can speak fairly knowledgeably about attendance for the purposes of instructional programs. So attendance does count this year. That in the guidance, we have made it very clear that there needs to be daily contact with students who are in remote learning. Obviously, if they're in person, that's certainly easier to determine what their attendance level is. But especially for our remote learners, that there needs to be a point of contact each day for those learners. So that is going to be vary based upon school structure, schedule, etc. So we made some best practice suggestions in the guidance with regard to possibly appointing an advisory teacher to a small group of students, and that's going to be their check-in each day with for the purposes of attendance, so that that person checks in with a small group of students every day and reports back to the school on attendance, making sure they're keeping up with their assignments, making sure they're attending their remote sessions, etc. So each individual district, based upon the schedule that they choose, or each individual school really, and the schedule that the student has is being implemented for the student, is going to have to devise that mechanism for taking attendance, but it needs to be daily, and that needs to be reported in SIRS, and it will count for state aid purposes.
Great. Thank you. So we are actually right on time, 11:30, but if there are more questions, you probably can stay in a couple of more minutes, otherwise we can. I see now hands raised. So I love you guys were here. I mean, this was very useful. I would look forward actually inviting you back maybe at another time.
Of course. I would be happy to come back to CPAC.
Yeah. Don't know if you have any last comment that you want to make, or any other things that you would like to say. Otherwise, we just move on with the rest of our meeting.
No, I just wanted to, thank everyone for sticking it out through our presentation Q&A. Thank you, Mary Beth and Jason, for helping with that. You probably saw the announcement that, as we press forward with a search for a permanent commissioner, our chancellor, Betty Rosa from the Bronx, has decided to step down as the chancellor in order to become the interim commissioner while we continue the search. So I think that's really important for us from a continuity perspective, to have someone with her longevity and talent and camaraderie doing this work, to be in that role. This process, because of the environment that we're in, has taken longer than anticipated. And so, we're definitely comforted to know that she will step into that role for us, and continue her seamless work with Chancellor Carranza and other superintendents around the state. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any last word from Mary Beth or from Jason?
No, thank you very much for having us. This was great, a great opportunity to interact with New York City. That's a place I do not get to interact with as much as I would like to, and certainly having access to parents is always key for my teams and my work. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Jason, anything?
Yeah, no, I would agree. Thank you all. We greatly appreciate your input and having a chance to listen in and gain perspective to help inform our work going forward. Can't thank you enough for that. So
that's great. Thank you very much. In terms of our agenda, I think all we have left at this point is to adopt our minutes. Jimmy or Marie, do we have anything else besides that to deal with?
No, this is actually it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I also wanted to note that Ms. Sharon Rancher is on here. I'm not too sure whether she wanted to say anything before we move on to CPAC business.
Sure.
Here she is. Morning, Ms. Rancher. You're on mute.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. And I've been listening intently, and I have nothing to add at this point, but I'm always available to answer any questions you may have, and I look forward to it. And I'm just always so inspired by our families and who you're representing, and your representation of our families around all of these important issues. So please know that we're here to support you, and please reach out anytime, and I'll be glad to respond and help in any way that I can. So thanks, everyone.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. So just in terms of CPAC business, all the voting members, you should have received the minutes from July. And if there are there was actually a correction that was mailed in and we made it. Is there any additional correction that we want to make? Otherwise, we're just gonna adopt the minutes unless somebody has any changes.
You made the changes, so thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for catching it. All right, I hear now additional amendments, so we adopt the minutes from July. I think the only one more thing that we might have in terms of CPAC business is this, that is something just food for the thought. So right now we have scheduled to have our election for CPAC election in October. I don't know exactly what day of October, but the second Thursday. So the question is, given so many PA and PTA, and consequently so many president council are gonna have problems running their own election and consequently potentially delaying. So October 8th will be at this point our election. Should we have our meeting on the 29th instead, so that we give of October, so that we give the entire month time for President Council to actually have had their election? We can still have the October 9 meeting just as a discussion meeting after 29th actually for election. We don't need to make a specific decision right now. It's just like something that we might want to think about. And I see, Rashida, you raise your hand, so go ahead.
Yeah, so District 4 President's Council probably won't even have their President's Council elections until November. Because the schools are going to have their elections, hopefully all the schools will have their elections in October. And that's a big
or September, right?
That's provided we have guidance.
Say it again, Mari.
That's provided we all have guidance on how to move
Oh,
forward with
well.
it.
Right, okay.
To be determined.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
so I think this is just to be determined even within our own or PAs and within our own president's councils.
Yeah, I don't know anyone that's going to be ready to have it in September.
Okay, so the other way will be to decide to hold them. I was trying not to still have the election in October rather than postponing them. But I guess we can decide on like a minimum number of PA and PTAs that have had their elections by a certain date to make.
Can you revisit this closer to October and see where we stand at that point?
Totally. We can totally revisit them. And Cecilia, see you raise your hand. Cecilia
Yes,
did 26, yeah.
I was going to suggest you either plan for November, which would make it more likely to everyone to have had their elections, because as of now, we have until October 31st. So if PTAs have elections, then you still need the president council election. So yeah, November,
Okay,
like
so,
at the end
so
of
let's,
November.
So let's just talk about it maybe in September or well, I guess we cannot talk about it in October. We need to talk about it in September and make a decision. Lourdes?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, Marco, and I agree with D70, what is that, D26 and the other lady that just spoke. We don't know when our elections are gonna take place for PAs and PTAs because guidelines are not out. Without those guidelines, our PAs and PTAs are leaving open doors for grievances to happen. So with that said, I mean, I think the first thing we need to work on as a collective group is work on maybe some recommendations for those guidelines, since we haven't heard anything from legal.
Okay, that's great.
Not only that, Adrian did say that they were beginning to work on it and she would like our take on it. So we need to be able to not only do that, we need to meet, not here like now, but we need to have a meeting to discuss it and see how we can move forward to be able to go. Because this is not the place to be having this discussion.
Right. It's actually, we're gonna have that meeting
Correct.
a week from now on the 10th, on next
Okay.
Thursday, right? District 10.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I apologize
Richard.
for not being able to join yesterday in our working session. I was working overnight. I have a concern regarding, like the other presidents have announced, that there's a big question mark on when are we going to have our PTA, PA elections, and also President's Council elections. The district teams are and the BETs are working very well in helping make this transition look easy for us, and I appreciate that, from District 10's stand. However, like many of the presidents have stated, it's becoming a little bit that our waiver is extended till October 31st, which that means that CPAC won't. Will this mean that CPAC won't have the executive board won't have any power up to October 31st? And then if they move the election of CPAC to, let's say, November 5th, which is the next following Thursday, it won't allow to have the executive board any powers to conduct that election or or to proceed anything, if I'm not mistaken. So that's number one that I have. And I have a follow-up question. I don't know if you guys discussed it regarding the situation with this returning back to school and the mayor's press conference yesterday that he gave with the chancellor. Our district is, as you know, very overcrowded, like many of the districts in the city of New York. And the turnaround, the numbers of surveys or parents requesting for in-person learning or blended learning or remote learning is very low in comparison to the amount of families living in our district. So there's a lot of information that is lacking, and our parents have been reaching out to PTAs and PA presidents, questioning, how they're going to fit, all these students that the parents decided not to fill the survey. And they watched the press conference yesterday from the chancellor and the mayor, and I watched it too, and I found that it wasn't delivered in a way that the questions were evaded. So I strongly feel that I don't know. We know we live in our schools. We've been in our schools. We spend long times of hours in our school buildings. We know how the conditions of them. Although the numbers of COVID tests have been coming down low, and that's what the official numbers are coming out from city agencies and so on and so forth. That's great to know, but there is still a imminent threat out there. And knowing from how our school buildings are, and knowing how our children are supposed to be children, meaning that we cannot tell them, don't do this, don't do that. It becomes a very primitive, I would say, learning environment for them if they were to go back to school fully. I understand that there's some flaws with the remote learning, and there's still some questionable doubts with so many things. There's so many variables, but I think that we cannot, as parents, we cannot put our children in jeopardy. We cannot put our children at risk. We cannot put our children as tests, so that they can go into an environment where it's not safe, where they don't know exactly, where they're just assuming that it's going to be perfectly fine. And then this is going to create problems later on for ourselves as parents. So I know that every parent in the city of New York may have made their choice. They made their choice, and that's a responsibility, like the mayor said yesterday. That's the parents' responsibility, whether they choose blended learning or remote learning. But at the end of the day, once our children enter the city of New York public schools, the Department of Education becomes a local parenti, and they're in charge. And the accountability amount of level that they'll be held accountable for is going to be very high. And I think that, with all due respect, our custodian engineers are very great. They do as much as possible that they can, but we know for sure that our buildings are not clean thoroughly, that our buildings are dirty to begin with. And, this puts a lot of doubt, and I think that we need to be extremely careful. And I know parents that, our work duties, that we are required to be working 5-6 days a week, or even 7 days a week. And sometimes childcare is an issue. With blended learning, what are we going to tell our employers? Hey, we can only send our kids 3 days out of the week, but then 2 days we need to take off. Or for example, in my district, they're choosing models 2B and or 2A, where guess what? Kids are going to be in school once a week. One time a day, and then 3 groups going in it, and because they're all planning according to their needs based on the occupancy levels in the building. So imagine it's a very different situation. And with respects to the principal, the administrator that was in that press conference yesterday, when asked about how the plan was for her school, or the discrepancies, or that they were not in agreement with the teachers union and the principals administration union with the city of New York, and then sending the principal to respond for 1,800 principals, that was not right. That was the mayor evaded the question. The mayor did not answer the question, and the mayor just wants the city of New York to go back fully, because I know it's a lot of problems. But why Los Angeles, Boston, Chicago, and all these major cities have decided to go fully remote? Because there is imminent threat of this virus. And right now is the decision of parents to make an educated, best decision for their children. This is what I'm imploring to all my colleagues and president and CPAC. I know that you represent your constituents in your district, but at this point, our children are first line They're the first line. They're going into the trenches. So I really, really, really want to take this opportunity. And I'm sorry, Marco, that I'm taking a while to say this, but I always say that, the mayor says, oh, I'm a public education parent. You were. You don't have any children in the public education department right now in New York City DOE. So when I hear this, that, it will be safe, that's a particular school. That is not the other 1799 schools that are on the list. That, this is something that we still do not know the actual numbers. I'm hearing that there's about 600,000 parents or families that did not fill out this remote learning or blended learning survey. You know how many families are those that were not, because they're not number one, maybe they didn't feel like they needed to fill it out, but didn't know how to fill it, or maybe the big question mark was there. So now principals are, and the way the survey came back about teachers wanting to teach from remote because of the concern of their health. This also is to put, I was reading the commenting and the questions from that live feed from the mayor. People were putting questions that were very legit. Who's going to do the cleaning? Are you expecting to have your child for 6 hours and 20 minutes with a mask? And then who's going to control? And then you take the mask off for a press conference for whatever reason, but then you expect your child to be 6 hours and 20 minutes with a mask. And God knows what other things that the teachers are going to have to be required to do in order to teach them. So there's a lot of stuff that we see, but until you're not inside the schools, you cannot judge a school based on the outside. You have to be inside of the school to actually physically know what's going on. So, everybody's right now calm because COVID numbers are down. The virus is there until a good vaccine gets approved and scientifically FDA approved that we are able to, it's been clinically proven in human trials, then be my guest, open up the school system. But if other major Department of Education systems in the United States are deciding to postpone or delay the start of school, in-person school, this is a reason, that, listen, not to jump off topic, but look at another school district. They recently opened and 100 kids got infected. This is not made up news. This is something that could happen. There was another valid question. You are going to sanitize the school buildings, right? You're going to do all these electromagnetic cleaning and all that. Great. But children are going to be walking to school or taking the bus and the subway, and these subways are still going to be contaminated because you don't have an MTA employee literally cleaning the poles or the chairs every second somebody sits or gets up. So there is greater exposure to this. So therefore, there is no way to actually trace this virus the way the city of New York is saying that they're going to do it. It's great that they want to plan, but I think the Department of Education needs more time in planning. Right now, it's, the mayor saying the parents can decide. Yes, we can. Those parents that have decided for full remote learning, and I'm one of them, that I decided for full remote learning, is because myself as a healthcare professional and with my children and the children of District 10, I feel that they still need to be prioritized. They need to be on the top of the list, and the children are not ready to go back into these school buildings. They're overcrowded to begin with. But most parents that decided to go for blended, they did it basically for work reasons. Believe it or not, most of the parents that I've spoken to, work related reasons. Why? Because they don't have childcare. Why? Because unemployment benefits are not sufficient to live in the city of New York. So they have a lot of variables that parents chose to go back fully in person. But most of the parents, they weren't informed properly, and they're like, oh, but I thought my child was going to be in school 5 days of the week. And I told them, yes, your child will be in school 5 days of the week, but your child will be in a blended model, meaning that your child will be either 3 days, 2 days, or once a week, depending on how the structure of the school decides. So this is really like where parents are starting to come back and say, oh, I didn't know that. So please, just make that educated guess. And, there's a lot of questions in high schools, 3,000 kids, 5,000 kids.
Excuse
How are you
me.
going to do that? So, yeah. So I just wanted to share that. And
Thank
and
you,
sorry
Richard.
for that.
Thank you, Richard. You did do a lot and you gave a lot of insight. But there's others that would like to speak. And if you want, you can always contact us. We have these meetings, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Actually, I think we are done with the meeting at this point. The last business point was the minutes. We adopted the minutes. We have food for thought in terms of like what are we gonna do with the election, and we're gonna have to deal with that. We have at this point, Adrian confirmed that we're gonna have a meeting with her next Thursday specifically to address all the various PA and PTAs and of course President Council's issues like elections and things like that. So we have a week to prepare to point out all the issues that need to be addressed on that side of things. We'll confirm with her. I assume the meeting will be a 10 to 12 meeting, but I'll need to confirm with her first, and we'll send an email to everybody inviting. I guess this closes the meeting for today, unless Jimmy, you wanted to add anything?
No, everything's okay.
Great. All right. Thank everybody for being
Thank
here.
you, everyone.
And pleasure only to see you guys. And
thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marco.
Thank you.
Everyone, have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Marco, you have the chat, right? For other questions? It downloads?
It downloads, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, y'all.
Great meeting. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Take care. Okay, gonna close the meeting, guys. So it's gonna kick you all out.